Hi, it's Kristen, and today is another Diary Days episode. So, life update as we always start out. I took graduation photos. We went to the park. It was hot. I was sweating in high heels. Struggle, as we all know, because it's just not comfortable. I don't know why we put ourselves through that. Beauty is pain. But doing that made me think back on my education career, as we know that I've talked about it many times already. Been in school for a long time. To graduate is something that everyone looks forward to. Me, not so much. I think it's probably just because I don't like being the center of attention. For the most part, sometimes just like a big crowd like that throws me off. However, it did bring me to today's topic, which is nostalgia. And I'm going to talk about it both in the sense of personal life and then pop culture. Because a lot of trends we see in pop culture, at least nowadays, is to bring back a sense of nostalgia. I think a lot of that has to deal with COVID. We're not going to get into COVID for the entire time, but mainly nostalgia. Nostalgia is defined as a sentimental longing or wistful affection for the past, specifically something that relates to a happier time in life. And I think a majority of us were probably happier before COVID because so many things have changed post-COVID. However, I'm not going to get into COVID. I'm just saying we were completely different people back then because we didn't expect to be isolated from everyone. Nostalgia holds a big place in my heart. If I could be described as something, I would take the part from nostalgia, the part that says sentimental longing. I am a person filled with such longing, not for the past all the time, mainly I guess for the past, but also I long for the future, which is something that a lot of people would be like, don't do that. Don't long for something that hasn't happened yet. I can't help it. I'm sorry. I want to know what the future looks like. If I could go forward in 5, 10, 15, 20 years and see what it's like and then come back to the place I am now, I would love to do that. Not all Marty McFly mess with the future timeline, just in the sense that I would like to see where I'm at in the future and not to see all the choices that led me there, but if I can go and look at it and be like, wow, okay, cool. So I know that I'm doing something right, and right now it's going to pay off in the future. I don't know if anyone has ever played the game Life is Strange, but there's that part where she can rewind and make a different choice. Not saying anything like that, although I would probably abuse that power if I had it, not to change things, but just to go back. There's that quote, I think, or it's a song lyric, I don't know. The part where it's we don't know that we're living in a memory until it's already passed, and then we look back at it and we're like, wow, I was just having a good time. That to me is the core of nostalgia, because you don't know you're living in what's going to become a memory. And I have so many fond memories of my friends, specifically being back in high school. I spent every day with my friends, and then you move on to college. You're not with people that you were with 24/7. These are people who you spent almost every minute, every hour of the day with for years, especially if you knew your friends back from elementary school. My best friend, one of the best friends that I have, I've known him since I was 3. We met in pre-K, and then we went to elementary school, middle school, high school together, and we're still friends to this day. And I think that I have such a longing to always have him in my life because he's always been in my life. So my longing comes from knowing him in the past and wishing that I will know him in the future. So nostalgia is rooted in the Greek words for return and pain. And I think that it's something that is actually really beautiful, because even though it's rooted in the word pain, it's not necessarily all the time painful. I think that when people think of nostalgia, sometimes they think of it's this painful memory, it brings sad emotions to the forefront. And when you use words like sentimental, longing, and return, and wistful, you're yeah, that is a very painful thing to go through. I don't necessarily think back on the things that I miss with the sense of nostalgia being that it's painful to think back on it. When I think of things that are painful to think back on, I just think that it's traumatizing. I don't think that I'm nostalgic for the trauma. I think I'm nostalgic for the things that led me up to that point. Like when you have a good relationship and then you see it all come crashing and burning down, you're not like, dang, I miss that rough patch. I wish I could go back to it. No, you're nostalgic for the parts that were good. So mainly nostalgia, I feel, is rooted in the sense of pleasure. Maybe a slight sadness because you know you can never go back to it. But I think that a lot of it is rooted in the good memories. So that's mainly the parts I want to focus on, the good memories. I think back to the early 2000s, back in my day, as I say, like thinking of how a lot of us are nostalgic for like the old 2000s Disney Channel movies. And we're like, oh, they don't make shows like this anymore. They don't make movies like this anymore. That's really true. And I haven't watched the new High School Musical show that they have on Disney, but I guarantee you, in my heart, it's not going to be the same as the movies. I'm not going to get that same feeling of anticipation when I count down the commercials until the movie starts. I used to be the kind of kid who would like run to go get a snack or something and count down the time in my head so I knew exactly how long I had between when a commercial started and when the show would come back on. Usually it was like 7 to 8 minutes from what I remember. But that's the kind of nostalgia that I have, that I think about. I think of when my cousin was growing up and I introduced her to One Direction. I actually sat down with my cousin and we came up with some questions for me to answer about nostalgia, which we'll get into. I should preface this by saying that only half of this video is visual and the other half is audio. Don't know if that's necessarily okay, but I feel like including the part of myself that is wistful and including like the little recalls to what I'm talking about will be really helpful. So without further ado, let's get into the questions. And I will entertain you with some jazz hands. No. Some visuals, some throwbacks, maybe some things to keep you entertained and you'll be like, oh, I remember that. And you can tell me the feelings you had about certain things. Maybe I like something you were like, I absolutely hated that, or I would never want to go back to that time. And that's completely valid for you. And I want to hear all about it. So, let's start getting nostalgic. So, the questions that me and my cousin wrote starts off with the first one of, what is your definition of nostalgia? And nowadays we create slang and it's usually not the same as its literal definition of the word. So to me, nostalgia is that sentimental longing with a happy association, more so towards childhood and adolescence. I find myself really missing how I was in high school with my friends. Not missing high school, but missing all those moments that we had together. And whenever me and my friends get together, we love to reminisce on those things. This kind of ties into the second question, which is, do you find nostalgia to be a pleasant or bittersweet emotion? And for me, I really do think it's more bittersweet. And it is pleasant at times, but I focus on the bittersweet part. And I think of this quote or this post that says, in another universe, me and my school friends are still sitting together at lunch. I remember so many fond memories of sitting with my friends at lunch and just making jokes and talking about our day and being able to spend time together in a way that we don't get to have as often as adults. Following that question, we have, what smells, sounds, tastes, or sights most often trigger nostalgic feelings? I don't know if anyone else is on like early 2000s TikTok where they mainly post like nostalgic compilations of things that we used to watch or see or play with in our childhood. I frequently get those of like what it was like to grow up in the early 2000s. Those are sites that really bring me to have nostalgic feelings. And I think of them often sometimes when I go to see my cousins at school because they go to the same schools that I went to. And I think of breakfast pizza. I feel like a lot of people have that memory of breakfast pizza because it was so good and they sell it now in like bulk boxes that you can get as an adult. I think that nostalgia really comes with being able to miss the things that you had as a child and take comfort in the fact that you had them in the past, but it makes you want them more in your present and in your future. One other thing that really gets me nostalgic for like a sound is High School Musical's Bet on It, because when I was younger, my brother and I would put on little like musical plays for our parents, and his song was always Bet on It, and he did the most theatrical version of it being Troy Bolton. And to this day, we still will put on that song and be like, okay, go on, put on a show to him all the time. I know I said that, but that also goes with the next question is of what old songs, movies, or TV shows evoke nostalgia for you? High School Musical is definitely one of them. Actually, it's one of my lock-in songs. Like, I spend a good majority of the time when I'm supposed to be doing work, I'll put on my music, and I have Now or Never from High School Musical 3 playing, so I can log in to finish all my final assignments. It's partly a nostalgic feeling of being so excited to like hear the songs and watch the movie, but also it connects me to my younger self as an adult from when I was so excited to actually get stuff done and do my work. Not saying that I'm not excited for schoolwork now. It's just that when you do it so often, it becomes tedious. And I think that's what's part of nostalgia, is being able to go into the past and remember how easy things were or they used to be. I actually haven't seen High School Musical, any of them, in a really long time, and that's probably something that I'm going to do this summer, honestly, is just rewatch all the old shows and movies that I can, especially the ones from my childhood, just because they bring such a peace over me and an excitement that I don't get as often when new shows or movies come out. It's partly one of the reasons why I was like so excited when Disney Plus came out, because they had all these old shows that you couldn't really watch anywhere else except for on like illegal streaming sites of things that were so relevant and prevalent in my childhood. For instance, every single season of Hannah Montana, I hadn't watched Hannah Montana since it ended. And then Disney Plus came out and it gave me the opportunity to sit down and watch every single episode. And it amazes me how much my mind has retained from watching it as a child into an adult. Like, I think it's so amazing how much the human brain can retain, because for some reason I'm perfectly capable of recalling the words to a song I heard when I was like 6 years old and reciting it now like 20 years later. For reference, I have a playlist on my phone. It's called Childhood Dreams, and it's filled with old Disney Channel songs, like every single artist that you can imagine. And my number one played song on that list is Hannah Montana's The Climb, or Miley Cyrus's The Climb, which is also one of my lock-in songs, actually, guys. But Hannah Montana is probably the one show and what the songs that evokes the most nostalgia for me, because I wanted so badly to be Hannah Montana. I don't know if that's like a universal experience for a lot of girls, but I wanted to be her so bad. I wanted her closet. I wanted to be famous and also be a normal person because I didn't want to have people invading my personal life. I was also heavily invested in the Jake versus Jesse team debate. I was Team Jesse, I'm just saying, guys. But when I listen to those old songs on my playlist, it makes me feel not young again, but sort of whimsical in a way that you can't really recreate with a lot of the pop culture that we have today. And a lot of pop culture recreates art of the past in the sense that we're seeing trends come back into play. You see it a lot when like a really popular track will take like the intro from a past song and remaster it into the new song, and it becomes the most popular thing you could ever think of because it has these nostalgic ties that people will inherently remember in their brain, because it's something that we once enjoyed and we were so in love with it at the time that we're automatically connecting those feelings with these new songs. So the next question is, how does nostalgia affect your relationships with others, both past and present? For me, I think this question can be answered in a 3-part way of past and present because, as I mentioned before, my best friend, we've been friends since we were 3 years old. So a lot of my experiences in life have been with him, mainly because he's the person that I've known the longest outside of like my family. So in that case, that relationship is both my past and my present. In the past sense, I have relationships with my friends from high school that I still have to this day, and we talk mainly all the time. And it's a really beautiful thing to have in life because we're so connected by the past that we bring it into our present. We love to reminisce together and to tell stories of things that happened to us in high school together to new people we meet. And I think that's the third way that nostalgia affects your relationships, because if you have something in the past that you want to share with people, it can connect you to them because they might also have an experience like that. They might have one similar or so dissimilar that you two can compare. And by being able to share these stories, it makes us so interconnected with one another. I think that's a really beautiful thing about the human experience, is that even if you have something in your life that you think is similar and solely your own, it's most likely going to be something that at least one person in the world can relate to. That actually goes with the next question is, do you think nostalgia is a shared human experience or is it more personal? I really do think that it can be both. Like I said, you can have something that you think is singular to yourself and your own experience, but most likely there's going to be someone who possibly has the same experience as you. It's not going to be with the same people or at the same time, but the events can be eerily similar, even if they're not an exact copy of one another. However, just because it is something that can be a shared experience, it doesn't take away from the personal aspect, because your life is your own. No one is going to have the exact same life as you. No matter how much anyone would try to intimidate you or copy you, they can't be you. You are a unique individual. Therefore, your experiences are uniquely your own, but in the same way, they're not. It's almost like a paradox, because if so many things can happen to people and all of them can be similar in some ways, it doesn't make it special, but it somehow still makes it unique. For instance, if something happened to me and it happened to another person, but we don't have the same outcome on life because of it, then it's a unique experience. That's what makes it a shared human experience, but so personal at the same time. It's very much a paradox in its own way. The next question says, do you feel like nostalgia has influenced your decisions and choices in life? For me, it has to be a yes, because I feel like I make a lot of choices in my life due to the people in my life because they've shaped who I am. And I don't necessarily know if that's technically nostalgic, but it is like wistful affection, like the definition of nostalgia says. The people in my life have influenced me so much, and when I think of things that I do that remind me of them, I will continue to make those decisions because I have so much love for the people who have shaped me. Nostalgia is also the thing that allows me to go out and try new experiences or to just repeat patterns, because if I know how something feels, I'm going to want to do it again, or maybe not do it again, depending on what kind of nostalgia it is. This isn't necessarily to say that nostalgia runs my life, but it does influence it in little trivial aspects. I believe I don't make big life choices because of something that made me happy in the past. Although I would say that maybe my biggest life choice that's been decided by nostalgia has been my major. I had this really wonderful journalism teacher in middle school. It was my first ever experience in journalism. She was my teacher all throughout middle school. From 6th grade, I took her journalism intro class, and then I took her newspaper class in 7th grade, and then in 8th grade, I took yearbook. So for all those years, she was my teacher in journalism, and I loved her so much. She was my favorite person in that entire school. She's still one of my favorite people in the entire world. And every time I get the opportunity to go back to my middle school, I go and I see her, and we just catch up on everything that we possibly can. So I think that she is the part of my nostalgia that influences my decision in life, because she ultimately led me to getting my associates in journalism and putting that initial love and respect for the art of journalism. The next question says, how do you balance your longing for the past with the need to embrace the present and future? I think the important thing for balance is knowing what you can go back to, because you can't ever go back to the past. You can long for it, sure, but you always have to remember that it's not coming back, and you can recreate it, but it's not going to have the same magic that it once had. I think the key to embracing the present and the future is to know that it can become just as magical as it was in the past. Even if it's not the same type of magic, it might be different, and different might be better. Holding on to the past is just going to hinder your ability to become who you are supposed to be or who you want to be. You can't ever go back and be the same person that you were 5, 10, 15 years ago. But you can embrace those traits that you used to have and find them to fit into who you are today. I think that's one of the things that you take into account when you balance your longing and your embracing of the past and the present and future. The last question to me is a no-brainer to answer, but I'm just going to ask it in the first place, which is it wrong to be nostalgic? And for me, I'm going to say no, just because you've heard me wax poetic on the past for the past 14 minutes already. Therefore, you know that I don't have a problem with being nostalgic. And I don't necessarily think it's wrong to miss the past. I think the past is what made you who you are. All the good, bad, and ugly are essentially core parts of your being. You can't ever go in and rewrite your DNA. And why would you want to do that with the thing that made you who you are? Sure, it's not perfect. Nothing's perfect. And that's me saying this as a perfectionist. But the ability to be nostalgic and love the past is something that takes a lot of introspective work. Therefore, I don't necessarily think it's wrong, because if you can look back on the things that have happened to you with fondness, then I think you're doing just fine. Of course, nostalgia can be wrong if you take it to not move forward. If you're so stuck in the past that you can't even take a step into the future, that's where I think it would be a little bit wrong to get caught up in it. But other than that, if you're not hindering your entire life based on one small thing in the past, then I think you're doing great. That being said, there are a lot of people who choose to stay in the past and not move forward. You see it a lot of the times on, honestly, probably a TLC show. Since that was the last question, we can move forward into the last part of the show, which is dealing with nostalgia. And most of the time, we don't think of nostalgia as something to be dealt with. I think, however, a certain amount of people can say that they are stuck in the past, and that's where it comes from, needing to correct that problem. And to warn you, I have talked about this before, but we'll say that nostalgia can come from anything. But the main case of that, and I said it before and I'll say it again, the fear of change. I have that problem, but I'm also not so nostalgic that I can't move forward into the future. I don't know what to say about that. I'm just a paradox of a person, I guess. But the fear of change really triggers nostalgia in people, because you just want to go back to how things were and not embrace that change. But eventually you have to learn to accept that nothing is forever. Everything's going to change. Change is the most inevitable thing in the world. Allow me to be nostalgic again for a second. But I watched a lot of Grey's Anatomy growing up. My mom watched it, so I just stayed there and watched it with her. And one thing that they talk about a lot in Grey's Anatomy is change. And I had to really narrow it down, but I found this quote from Grey's Anatomy. It's in season 4, episode 1. It's literally called Change is Gonna Come. But Meredith says, change, we don't like it, we fear it, but we can't. But we can't stop it from coming. We either adapt to change or we get left behind. It hurts to grow. Anybody who tells you it doesn't is lying. But here's the truth. Sometimes the more things change, the more they stay the same. And sometimes change is good. Sometimes change is everything. And I always think back on that last part of the quote. It says, sometimes change is everything. Just to say it again, like it's so inevitable, but we just want to hold on to the past and not embrace change. But change is everything. It made you who you are. It'll make you who you'll become. It brings new people into your life, new goals, new hobbies, all these things that make you so uniquely yourself. Change is so personal. I think that's one of the things that I really love about nostalgia is that it brings about so much change that you are able to look at the past fondly. And when you have this trait almost of nostalgia, it means you have the strength to recognize the value of other people and experiences that you've had in your life. Therefore, you'll be able to look and recognize at the new experiences that you have and the new people that change brings into your life. And you can hold on to all of the nostalgia, but you also have to be able to embrace the possibility of something new. Oh, look right there. See, I got a nostalgia flashback. Something new from High School Musical. This could be the start of something new. Boom. Great connection. Anyway, sorry for that little brain connection moment, but there are 4 things that are like tips to help you stay connected with the present, but also like allow your nostalgia to be a part of your life. The first tip or trick is to focus on the present. And I know that that's like the most gimmicky piece of advice that anyone can give you, but it's really the most true that if you're too busy looking back, you're not going to notice what's happening right in front of you. So staying focused in the present is something that takes a lot of work. Looking at the way we are now, we as people have been so ingrained in this hustle culture that started to develop in the recent years that we just want to focus on the present and we just want to go and push toward it. And that's all we ever want to do. And then when we stop and take a moment to ourselves and think on the past, that's what we get stuck in. We get stuck in almost this hamster wheel of running and running and running to the future, and it hinders our ability to focus on the present, on the here and now, and what matters most in this current season of our life. So that's one thing that I really can't stand is hustle culture. Let the record show, and I will state it probably again in the future. I really hate this idea of hustle culture and the need to focus on the future to get to where we should be. Why can't we just embrace the now? Like that's what we're living in, and I don't understand why we're constantly pushing this idea of the grind on people and that you need to grind so hard to get anywhere in life. You are fine where you are at the moment. Don't think 5 steps ahead, because if you think 5 steps ahead, you're not going to look down at your feet in front of you and then you're going to trip over yourself. Okay, moving forward. Sorry for that mini rant. However, the second tip is to connect with people. And this can also possibly be a connection to nostalgia in a way. I'm saying it in the sense of like when you connect with people, you can reconnect with old friends if you want. You can fix bridges that were burnt, even if that's part of nostalgia, that's still moving forward into your present. Spend time with your current friends. Go out and make new ones. Because as people, as human beings, we are not meant to live life alone. We just weren't designed for that. People need companionship in order to be healthy. I'm not a doctor, but I'm pretty sure there's a science behind that. People make us who we are. That's literally the one thing about being nostalgic that I will always be a supporter of is the love we have for people that is in the past will continue to grow into the present and in the future. I'm not necessarily saying that if you hate someone, you'll probably love them in the future. I mean, you might, I don't know. And if you do, I love that for you. Congratulations. I'm just saying one of the things that we need to move past our nostalgia is to connect with people. Tell your friends how you're feeling. Let you and your friends reminisce and then make plans for the future. Don't just stop on the past. The third tip that kind of connects with that is to be able to find new things that you love. Open yourself up to things that you care about, whether it's like a hobby or a goal. Just find something to focus on that prevents your mind from wandering to the past. I think that we get so caught up in needing to be on trend that we don't have any goals or hobbies that we love for the right now. I don't know if that necessarily makes sense to anyone. The point is to just find new things that you love. Just allow yourself to be open to newness. And the last tip is to feel your feelings. This is something that I have to remind myself a lot of, is that you control your feelings don't control you. What I mean by this is just be mindful of your love of the past, but don't let it derail your future. Like, your feelings are valid, and I love you and I love them, and that's amazing, and I support you in everything that you do, but you can't let how you feel dictate every single piece of your life. I grew up in a family where we never expressed our emotions to each other, or even just like a general around each other. I never saw my grandma cry until I don't even know. I want to say 10. And that's 10 years of your life to never see the person that you see almost all the time cry. That's a long time, and that's kind of crazy. So don't bottle those feelings up. Express them. Control your feelings. Tell your therapist. Tell your friend. Allow yourself to let those feelings out, because if you don't, you're going to be stuck in that moment, in that feeling forever until you get it out. So that's my last tip, which means that this is the last part of the episode. I don't have anything else really to say except that nostalgia is a completely valid feeling. I get caught up in it all the time. And I don't think that many of us even realize what we're feeling is nostalgia when we reminisce for the past or when we think on the past. So it's one topic that I really think that we should talk about more, because it's so connected to who we are as people, and it's the easiest way to get to know someone is when you have a shared experience. So in the end, just don't be afraid to share those experiences or talk about them with yourself. Write them down, get a journal, get a diary, hint, hint, wink, wink, diary days, promo. But that's the end of this episode. So until I see you again, keep your thoughts sharp, keep your pencil sharp, and I'll see you next time.